Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gangs All Here Annex Brewing Project, Adaptable Outdoor Recreation Society, Rotary Club of Lethbridge Mosaic, Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits beer tasting. I am your host for tonight, Kyle Baines, and I'm joined by so many fantastic people. As always, I have our incredible, intrepid camera and video stream maestro, Aaron Trozo with Bird Media. I'm also joined by Steve Hawley of the Adaptable Outdoor Recreation Society. Hello, Steve.
Hi, thanks for inviting us out for this. Really appreciate it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. You do have the beers in front of you, right? Because we're going to be asking you questions about the beers all night. Not so much.
I've got them right here. Don't worry.
All right. We're into it. I'm also joined, of course, by Rupert Manguel, who's been our guest many evenings, as well as Colin Williamson from Annex Ale Project. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
No, my pleasure. And then joining me on camera, which will not make anything confusing, we have another Kyle. We have Kyle Horvath from Rotary Club Lethbridge Mosaic, who is currently now blushing and very, very worried about what I've just got him roped into. Kyle, why don't you tell us why we're all here?
Yeah, there we go. Do a little slouch here. I'm a bit too tall for the camera.
Kyle's tall, I'm not.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kyle Biscalio Horvath from the Rotary Club of Lethbridge Mosaic. We initially met Steve Hawley from Adaptable Outdoors in November of 2021. He came and gave a presentation to our club and really sparked this passion and really enlivened this kind of passion for accessibility and inclusion within the outdoor community. And since then, we decided to do a virtual beer tasting. We didn't really have a date to start. We ended up settling with Father's Day, as that probably gave us the most amount of time to practice and study up and et cetera, and hopefully finish my master's, which is still coming, but
because you have so much spare time doing a master's.
And a girl.
Yeah, exactly.
Not in the same weekend. And yeah, but really happy to see you all tonight for this beer tasting with Annex Ales. I've drank them for years. I don't know how much more of a ramble aside from getting into these cups. Well,
why don't we get started by pouring your beer there, Kyle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's get you in. You did great. We're gonna get you a beer. We're gonna get me a beer.
Kyle.
Yeah. Heck yeah. All right. Well, we are gonna start ourselves off with the Idle Hands Italian Pils. Now, while we've got our first beer in the glass, before we get right into discussing it, Steve, would you, Kyle did a great job introducing you, but do you want to talk a little bit more about the Adaptable Outdoor Recreation Society? Now, I know you're going to do a proper presentation a little later, but why don't you kind of give us the short notes just to get us started?
Sure. So, yeah, we're a operated non-profit society based out of Pinch Creek that offers outdoor recreation or outdoor adventures to all ages living with mobility or cognitive challenges. So to do that, we have a variety of different pieces of adaptive equipment, which I'll show you later on in the presentation. And we also use a bit of ingenuity and teamwork. And basically our aim is to remove barriers that prevent a large section of our population from accessing the outdoors and from accessing activities such as paddling, fishing, and hiking. So as an organization, we currently offer all three of those activities, and we also just this year started to offer outdoor adaptive yoga programs. So I'll tell you a bit more about us later on, but I'll pass it back over now to Kyle.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve. We'll talk to you a little bit more in a second, but let's dig into our first Annex beer here, and let's turn it over to a certain point to Rupert and Colin. We have an Italian Pils in our glasses. Now, I'm a big fan of Italian Pils. I'm a big fan of Idle Hands in general. Even the old packaging, I really liked it. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the style, a little bit about what goes into it, and maybe about some of the challenges about making a lager versus making an ale, and just how much more work it is.
Sure. So yeah, we have Idle Hands here. It's an Italian Pilsner. What makes it different from a standard everyday Pilsner that you'd probably be used to is that it has a lot of hops added to it during the fermentation. So we call that process dry hopping. And what that's going to do is extract a lot of the aromas and flavors from the hops with leaving bitterness behind with the hops. So we're looking to get a lot of the aromas that are known to the variety of the hops, such as citrus, melon, nice fruit flavors, and leave bitterness behind. So when you're tasting it, that's what you're looking for. Also, along with the Italian Pilsner style, is you might come across a Pilsner that's a little bit hazier, and that's okay for that style of beer. With the dry hop, it does tend to leave some haze, so it might not be the most crystal clear beer, but that would be a reason for it. And challenges with a lager versus an ale would be the yeast health is the major challenge there. So your fermentation temperatures you need to nail at a cooler temperature than you typically would have with an ale. You need to get a bunch of yeast nutrients so that it's happy and active and doing all of its chemical reactions that it needs to do. And then the other factor is time. You need a lot of time to let it condition out, mellow out, so you don't get any harsh flavors, and it's a nice, clean profile, crispy, and very drink.
So yeah, Idle Hands.
Sorry, go ahead. You cut out there, so
Sorry,
I
was just gonna say. Sorry, I was just gonna say, Idle Hands was actually started off as a summer seasonal for us last year, and it did so well for us that we made it a full-time beer. And there was a lot of discussion around whether or not we're ready to have a full-time lager in our lineup, because it does tie up the tanks. So it does say a lot about where we are now as a brewery. We're just getting into our 5th year. That we've got these systems in place, and the team behind us that we can schedule a full-time lager. So
R.I.P. Meats and Bounds. I did love Meats and Bounds, but we move forward. Yeah. Now I'll ask, like, when you talk about it's going to tie up that tank space, it's a significant time difference. Like, if you're just going to turn over not just an IPA, but let's say an IPA, say it's force majeure or whatever else. If you're going to turn over an IPA, what's your time commitment in tank versus Idle Hands? Because it's a big difference, isn't it?
It's quite significant. Yeah. For an ale like the Force Majeure or the Ford Progress, with an ale yeast, you're from the day that you brew it to when you're packaging it, it's around 2 weeks. And then with the Pilsner, with the lager yeast, you're up to a month, so double. But that's some loose guidelines. It depends on the variety and the strain of yeast and the flavor that you're trying to achieve and all that. But generally, the longer that you leave it, the more mellow it's going to come out, and that's the goal with this beer.
Now, not to get too geeky, but I mean, a lot of people have seen Pilsner. Maybe they're familiar with that terrible green can garbage with a rabbit on the can. But Pilsner has become this absolutely gigantic category with traditional Czech-style double decoction pills, German pills, Italian pills, American styles like Victory Prima pills. You've got New Zealand style pills. What makes Italian pills very specifically separate from the rest of the Pilsner family?
That would be the dry hop. So what's happening during its fermentation is we're throwing in more hops, not just during the brewing process when we have wort that's boiling. We're adding hops for a little bit of bitterness for balance, but the fermentation when it's on the cold side around 12 degrees Celsius, we're adding upwards of 20 kilos of hops to this beer, and that's what's Italian, the dry hop aspect of it.
Awesome. Steve, on the idle hands, are you usually a lager guy or an ale guy? We don't have Steve's audio. I think he might be muted. I think he might have muted himself.
Oh, right.
Yep, he totally muted himself.
So I'd say that over winter I'm more of an ale guy, but in summer I prefer the lagers. So I kind of go back and forth.
How's this sitting with you?
Good. Yeah, I like it. Very nice. Bit more of a flavor to it than a lot of lagers, which I like. Yeah. Good beer. Good work, guys.
Awesome. Kyle, how are we doing on YouTube questions and comments? Do we have anything that we need to answer right away on the
There
first beer?
was nothing that I had seen so far.
Nothing yet. All right. So you are always free to ask questions. So for any of you who are not familiar with our format, this is not just me and Steve and Rupert and Colin talking to a camera. This is an interactive experience. You're free to ask questions, make comments, tell us what you think. If you're really curious about, where the Italian comes from in Italian pills, or why a golden ale is golden, or what have you, just jump in the comments, ask us questions. We're all here to answer them. And in a more specific sense, Rupert and Colin are here to answer them because they made the beer. I'm not really here to answer them at all, but they are, and they're here tonight to join us. So take advantage of their talents. They're here to answer your questions, not just mine. So on that note, let's move out of the lager category and into ales and move into good authority. Oddly enough, actually, the last of the core lineup for me to try, because I actually had good authority for the very first time after Idle Hands came out. I'd always kind of poo-pooed it, ignored it. I'd said, well, I know all there is to know about Annex. I've had Meets and Bounds, I've had Forward Progress, I've had Force Majeure. Why do I need to have good authority? Well, turns out, I don't know which beer tasting was, we were 20-something. I was very, very wrong about this. It's actually lovely. And I think for any of your friends who are maybe new to the craft beer category, it's a great starting point. Rupert, let's start with you. Why don't you introduce Good Authority and where it sits in the Annex lineup and a little bit of its history?
Yeah, so I think Annex always kind of specialized in North American style beers, usually very hop forward beers. And I think as the brew team sort of would finish up their days and reach for a beer after work, they were constantly reaching for 8% IPAs and like much heavier beers. And so the general feel was that they wanted something lighter. We weren't really in a position to have a full-time lager or anything like that. And the owners had just vacationed in Hawaii as well, where they fell in love with, I think it was a Kona beer.
Yep, Kona.
Long Wave?
Long Wave.
Longboard? Long Wave?
There's a wave in there. I think it's Long Wave.
But it's basically, they came home and they were like, we want to make this beer. So yeah, definitely it was whatever the dry hopped golden ale is from Kona. And so that's kind of where this came from. It was the closest thing we had to a full-time lager until Idle Hands came about. And we kind of use this beer as like an introductory to craft beer in general. Like if I, for instance, were gonna go have a barbecue with a bunch of buddies that only strictly drank Budweiser, I'd be like, okay, well, I don't really want to drink this. This is Good Authority is the beer that I would bring along.
Now, I got to assume that on the brewing side, it's always harder to make something light and delicate where you can't hide any mistakes. Like if you're making a coffee, bourbon, honey, licorice imperial stout, if you fuck it up, you can just kind of hide it. With a beer like this,
Yeah,
there's
that's
no
right.
hiding. This is very delicate. This is very technical. Colin, do you want to talk about like some of the challenges and how precise you have to be with making a beer like this?
Sure. Yeah, so like you said, there's not much of a profile for any off flavors to hide behind. So if we have anything process-wise that is wrong or not up to standard, it would probably come through in the flavor just because there's not a heap of hops to mask it, or even the malt bill and the alcohol. The alcohol's lower and the malt bill is lower as well. So the challenges would be to just hit the targets, and again, the yeast health is crucial. If your yeast isn't healthy, it's gonna leave some components and flavors that you're gonna pick up on. So we have a QA team that is looking at every batch that we package and giving us a baseline of where we're at for hygiene and everything to do with that. So if we even one little colony forming unit, we're on it and fixing it. So that's something that puts us ahead of the mark as well. And
Sorry, when you
it
say
pays
a
off 'cause it
colony
would
forming
definitely-
unit, like that's a new term even for
Yes.
me. What do you mean by colony forming
Okay.
unit?
That would be if you, in the lab setting, if you have a sample and you put it on one of those agar petri dishes and you let it grow. If there's anything growing there, then you have some sort of contamination. And we are good enough to see that we're coming back clean all the time. And if there is some kind of colony forming unit, then we have to deal with it right away. So we can tackle it before it hits the shelves.
And is
And
that kind of the
that's
yeast
probably
no
the
longer
biggest
gets
challenge.
reused, it just gets scrubbed, everything kind of gets re-sterilized and you start from new?
That's right. We look at where the source could have come from, and that yeast is now tarnished more or less. So we get rid of it and start a new strain of yeast, and everything's good again.
Now, obviously, that doesn't count for your fooder program, which we'll talk about a little later. But
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
for these clean light beers, yeah, there's no such thing as a clean agar plate when it comes to fooder beers. No.
If it comes out of the tanks behind us, that's what we're.
Stainless steel is aseptic and sterile and clean.
And I just want to dive in one other thing because I do pick it up with this water profile. Do you want to talk a little bit about your water? Because I'm sure you're stripping the water back to absolute neutrality and then re-injecting it with the salts you need to actually make beer.
Yeah, that's right. So we take our city water source and we put it through a couple different filters. One is an activated carbon filter, and that's going to take out your chlorides that are in the city water for disinfection. Chlorides they're a mineral and chemical that do not do well with yeast and beer and flavors. So we want to get that out of there as soon as possible. And then we get rid of the hardness as well. We have very hard water here in Calgary, and from things coming from the mountains and the runoff that comes with that. So we want to try to get our hardness down as much as possible. That's a lot of calcium and magnesium that we're taking out. And then we're left with a pretty good blank slate for a water profile, and we're building up a profile after that to suit this style. This style is more or less balanced between bitterness and sweetness with the malt. So we add some calcium chlorides and some sulfates to pronounce those notes that we want out of this.
Now, I
And
did
we
want to
use the pH.
Sorry, I did want to touch on just one question that occurred to me while you were talking. Almost everyone and their mum these days makes a blonde ale. It's their introductory beer to the brewery for everybody. You're doing a golden ale. It's something a little tiny bit different, and I know that is a stylistic choice. Why the golden ale? Why the little bit different from the blonde? Or is it just two different names that mean the same thing? And I don't think that one's true, but you want to walk me through it a little bit?
As far as I know, they're the same. It's just a different name.
They are not. They are totally different.
That's
Golden Ales has apparently have to teach the brewer brewing history. Colin, this is the first time. I'm really vain and terrible. Rupert's used to it. You might not be yet. But no, when I think golden ale, I think about these super, super hoppy, very light alcohol beers that are coming out of the UK in the very mid 2000s, say 2005 to 2008, that were kind of 2.5%, 3% alcohol, but they were super hoppy. They were hoppier than a lot of the North American IPAs without any real bitterness backing them up. They had absolutely no shelf life, but they were absolutely fascinating beers. And this very much reminds me more of those than it does to, I don't want to pick on Village, but it's the first one that comes to mind. Village is blonde. Much like Village, they've done some really cool things lately with their new experimental series. It tastes like the, hey, you want a Bud Light, here's this instead. This doesn't strike me as that. The Good Authority just, it tastes a cut above, and I think it actually has more of a provenance with those golden ales out of the UK in the mid-2000s than it does with the token blonde ale for a brewery that's just, you want Bud Light, here's this instead. And I think you're maybe underselling this as that for Annex, because I think it's actually better than
Well, thank you. But when we talk about our beers, obviously we're talking about Annex beers and Annex dry hops. Almost absolutely every beer we release.
It's one of your finest.
It's actually
qualities.
it's a selling point when we don't dry hop something now. So for us, this is like, in terms of an Annex beer, this would be an introductory to craft beer, and maybe more so an introductory to Annex and dry hopping and kind of what we're all about.
Aaron, how is Steve's video?
Still looks like.
Yeah, Steve is very frozen and has been for some time. We have your audio. You sound
he's happy.
great.
Yeah.
I like it.
We're gonna go with it, because we can do the PowerPoint independent of that, right?
I think so. Steve is there, right?
I think he just dropped. I think
just
he's gonna call back.
resetting.
Yeah, I think he's gonna call us back.
Oh.
So while Steve is resetting, do you guys want to talk a little bit about what's coming up next from Annex? Because you folks are always doing new seasonals. What's new? What should we be excited about from Annex in the next little while?
This week, actually, you're picking it up on Tuesday. We just released our Neighbor Day beer. So that was a collab. Every year we do a collab with our neighbor's establishment, who you guys might know. They're good friends, and we really respect what they do. We love their beers. Hopefully they feel the same way about us. But yeah, every year we get together and kind of put something in a can. This year it was our turn to brew it in our facility. So it's called Fast Friends. It's a Mexican style lager. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, sure.
What
Mexican style lager is everything that we talked about in terms of a lager, with the yeast, a nice clean profile, clear beer, nice yellow straw color. What makes it a Mexican lager is we're adding corn sugar to it. So that's a non-fermentable sugar that's going to stick around in the beer and add some sweetness to the beer. So that's what is special about that type of lager. And zero dry hop, right? So this is, like Rupert said, that's something we don't do very often, and that's actually a selling point for that beer.
So yeah,
no dry hop.
So the hops in that just.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the pressure. But also, thanks a lot for inviting us. This is the first time ever I've got to do a presentation while drinking beer, so it's quite a nice change. Thank you. So, as mentioned earlier, I'm Steve Holly from
Seventh now.
Adaptable. Is it?
What are we up to for the official beer tasting count? So this is my 105th. We're at 104 for the End of Holden Weekly, so this is 105 for me.
Number one for me. So,
Well, you're doing great.
And,
Let's. Why don't you talk us through it, Steve?
Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm Steve from Adaptable Outdoors, and we're a non-profit society based in Pitcher Creek. We're volunteer-led. Next slide, please. Aaron, you hit the next slide, please, Aaron. Okay. So yeah, together we're as a team trying to make outdoor adventures and nature accessible to people who live with mobility and cognitive challenges. Next slide, please. And so we started our organization after my wife and I moved down to southern Alberta and started volunteering for the adaptive ski program out at Castle Mountain. Through talking to some of the people we were skiing with there, we realized there were no summer programs available. And my wife and I had both volunteered for other organizations out in Canmore doing adaptive sports. So we clubbed together and tried to see if we could get some equipment to get one of the skiers out for a hike. And from that, we realized that more people started reaching out and there was a much greater need for what we could offer. So Adaptable Outdoors was born, and we created this organization to try and help people of all ages and all abilities. Next slide, please. And so our vision is for outdoor recreation to be accessible to people of all abilities. Next slide, please. Hit it again there, Aaron, please. Yeah, and our mission is to provide opportunities for people living with disabilities to experience the benefits of outdoor recreation. Next slide, please. And in doing that, we make sure that we adhere to a bunch of specific values, which are dignity and respect, environmental stewardship, collaboration, integrity, empathy, and understanding. Next slide, please, Aaron. Now, in order to deliver these experiences to people of all abilities who have all different needs, we've had to raise funds in order to be able to purchase specialized adaptive equipment. This equipment is very hard to source, also very expensive. So, for example, the device you see on the far left of this picture is called a Trail Rider. They cost around between $9,000 and $12,000 now. And when you think that a wheelchair these days can cost people up to $20,000, it can be very difficult for people to be able to afford all the devices that are required to remove those barriers and get people outside. So the boats as well, you see in this picture are specialized adaptations so that anybody can get out on the water. And again, that comes with a considerable cost. Next slide, please. So currently we have a bunch of adaptive kayaks. I mentioned adaptations earlier, and you can see those quite clearly in these two pictures. On the back of these boats, we've got outriggers added. Those outriggers drastically improve stability and make it very, very difficult to roll the kayak. Obviously is important for the kind of programs that we're running. We also have specialized seating in these boats, so we can put in a seat that has full lateral support. So if you have somebody with a disability who, say, leans to one side naturally, well, then this will hold them in place and prevent the boat from leaning to the side. We also have a bunch of gripping aids, which helps people hold the paddle while they're kayaking. We have, next slide, please. We also have a special adaptive fishing canoe. It's the only one in the world because we designed it in collaboration with a local boat maker, Joe Cunningham. Did an amazing job of listening to what we were looking for and building this for us. This has 2 sets of outriggers, so it's incredibly stable. We can walk around the boat and help people while they're fishing if needed. The guide is also facing the client, so we can help the person with lunch on the water if they want to, or we can also adjust them in the seat if they've shifted at all. And it's also set up really well for fishing, so it has a bunch of adaptations specifically for adaptive fishing. This boat is especially good for people with complex needs for a lot of the reasons that I just outlined. We also have, next slide please, Aaron. We also have an all-terrain buggy, which is like an all-terrain wheelchair. It's suitable for flat trails. It's also pretty cool in that it's waterproof and it floats. So after we've kayaked with people, we'll run them down the boat launch, as you can see in the top picture there. And they get to go into the lake and swim in the lake. And the buggy will actually just float and wait until we're ready to come back out, and we can just transfer the person in the water back into the buggy. It's also really good for accessing shore fishing areas, like on river, lakeside or river. It's actually designed to be used on beaches. Next slide, please, Aaron. We also have a trail rider, which I briefly mentioned earlier. This is an amazing piece of equipment that can make even the most rugged trails accessible to wheelchair users. So with the right number of people, the right teamwork, you can take a wheelchair user to the top of a mountain in a piece of equipment. So pretty incredible amount of freedom that it can afford people. And we're finding that these hikes have been very, very popular this year. So we're looking forward to doing more as the season goes on. Next slide, please. The last on the equipment. Oh, sorry, just go back a couple there, Aaron. There we go. Thanks. We've also got a bunch of adaptive fishing equipment. So we have gripping aids to help people hold the rod. And then we also have a specialized electric fishing rod. So somebody can actually reel in a fish at the push of a button, flick of the head, stomp of the foot, or sip of a straw. So we have a variety of different switches, which means that no matter what the person's needs, we can get somebody independently reeling in a fish. So pretty cool, and we're just kind of expanding those programs this year, so they're gaining in popularity, but we want to get the word out more that, you know, we can get anybody fishing. We also, next slide, please, Aaron. We also use a bunch of different foams and specialized cushions to make everything comfortable for people. Most pieces of equipment aren't one size fits all, so we have to usually adapt ourselves and add pieces of equipment onto existing equipment. And in this situation, we've adapted the trail rider for one of our clients. And I don't know about you, but he looks pretty happy and comfortable in that picture. I think he was having a fun time on the hike there. Next slide, please, Aaron. This is just a bit of an equipment wish list. We're always looking to add to our adaptive equipment fleet. We're looking for another pedal-driven fishing kayak, tandem kayak, another trail rider. And at the bottom there is the most advanced adaptive mountain bike in the world, which is made in Calgary, called the Bowhead Reach. They're an incredible piece of equipment. Again, can afford a wheelchair user unparalleled freedom, but they come at a great cost. So they cost around $21,000. So obviously, For us to expand into biking is a little ways off, but we hope that in the future we'll be able to offer downhill mountain biking programs to people. Next slide, please. And you can just go straight to the next one, please, Aaron. So in 2021, we ran fishing, hiking, and paddling programs, and this is a list of the different conditions that people experience that we helped. So a whole range of different abilities, and we also expect that list to grow considerably this year as we run more programs. Next slide, please. And yeah, one of the things we tried to do is give people their first ever adaptive sports experience. And with this client, it was first time ever kayaking. We developed the skills over a number of weeks, and I'm now told that a family bought her a paddleboard. So they all go out kayaking together, which is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to show people what's possible, and then maybe people can get the equipment that works for them and go out and recreate independently of us. Next slide, please. No worries. Okay. So this is another client who, again, had a first ever adaptive sport experience with us, and that wasn't until she was in her 30s. And I believe that's a crime. I think everybody should be able to get out kayaking, hiking, or doing whatever other outdoor activity you like to do. So if we can just go to the next slide, please, Aaron. There we go. And so this was the testimonial that Christina in the last slide gave about our programs. She had to say that dreams have now become a reality thanks to the dedicated staff, volunteers within this wonderful organization. They go above and beyond to make each experience as rich, memorable, and fulfilling as possible, while approaching the task with humor and the utmost care. Adaptable Outdoors and its programming has freed me from the confines of my disability, empowering me to feel that endless opportunities are within my reach. So that's what we aim to do, and thankfully we achieved it with Christine. Next slide, please. And although not everybody can provide a written testimonial, I think the smiles on these guys' faces show what they thought of our activities. And the fact that both of them are coming back out again this year for more kayaking also speaks volumes. Next slide, please. So in 2021, we delivered 65 experiences to 32 different clients living with disabilities. We also take out the family members and the caregivers hiking and kayaking. So last year we helped 35 family members or caregivers and delivered around 50 experiences to them while using 24 different volunteers. And yeah, it was a very busy and successful season, and this season is gearing up to be even busier. So that's great news. Next slide, please. I'll just go through these very quick, but we also ran a research project in partnership with the University of Lethbridge last year and measured the impact our programs have on health, quality of life, and well-being for both our clients and their caregivers. Next slide, please. We had incredible results with people seeing improved scores in every domain that they use to assess quality of life: physical, psychological, social, and environmental. We're seeing over 70% increase in all of those areas, which is amazing. Next slide, please. On the well-being surveys, we saw that 86% of our clients had increased scores after taking part in just one of our activities. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I mentioned, we found that even half a day out with us, engaging in one of our activities, saw huge improvements in social and emotional well-being, self-confidence, and renewed life interest. Next slide, please. So going forward, we need a whole bunch of things to be able to keep going and also expand and help more and more people. So on the next slide, I've listed a couple of these things. If you could switch to that, please, Aaron. Yeah, so these are just some of the things that we need to do. We're always on the lookout for other organizations or companies we can sponsor with, we can partner with, sorry. And we're always on the lookout for business sponsors that are looking to support a cause that involves inclusivity and access to people who have been underrepresented. Next slide, please. Just like to say a big thank you now, as I'm wrapping up, to all the donors and supporters that have made our programs possible over the years. Everybody on this slide and on the next slide, if it wasn't for the companies and organizations, we wouldn't have delivered any experience. So big thank you to all of those organizations. Next slide, please. And next slide. So here are my contact details. If anybody wants to reach out to me, you can give me a call or email me at the address there. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Annex Ales, to Andrew Hilton and CKXU, and to Rotary Mosaic of Lethbridge too for organising the fundraiser. Massively appreciated, and thanks so much for doing this for us and for our clients. Greatly appreciated. Thank you. Oh, and thanks to everybody who's bought a ticket this evening. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for the support.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was absolutely fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through everything you do. And I'm honestly shocked by the cost of the adaptable outdoor mountain bike. 21 grand. Like, okay, I'm a giant cycling nerd, and I have like a bike that was had the caliber of Tour de France 5 years ago. It was 10 grand. You can buy 2 of those for that money. That's madness. But I love that you're going for that, and that's incredible. So thank you so much. This is you know, Kyle told me what you did and everything else, and I had a broad idea. I didn't realize just how much went into it. I'm genuinely in awe of the fact that I get to do this now. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Scott.
Rupert, Colin, good luck following that. Let's talk about forward progress.
Yeah, right. Sorry, first I just want to say, Steve, you're doing fantastic work. Actually, truly incredible. So hats off to you.
Yeah, job.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to start talking about beer now?
Well, that's what we're here to do. Somehow we've got to pick up after Steve and carry on.
Yeah. At the very least, we'll cheers Steve here.
Yeah, we're gonna make a cheers.
So forward progress is our hazy pale ale. We were calling it a North American pale ale. It's a pretty wide spectrum, I think, of where this fits in that category, and like the category itself. But yeah, this is kind of the beer that we're known for. It's our flagship beer. This also started off as a small batch beer that at first sip, we just kind of decided, I wasn't around at the time, but they decided that it had a home in the core lineup, and it quickly became what we're known for. So I don't know if I want to talk about the details.
Sure. I just tagging on to that. I remember having this first time it was packaged and coming off the tap, and it blew our hats off. Just how smooth and mellow it was, and how much hop aroma and flavors we were getting from it. So we're like, this is going to be our core beer. It was decided that quick. This beer, pale ale, North American pale ale. It's hazy, and that's due to the yeast and the malt that we're putting in it. We put a lot of oats in so where 90%, 70 to 90% of the malt would be barley. The rest is filled up with specialty malt, and one of the specialty malts in this beer that makes it special is the oats. It's going to give it a nice pillowy, silky texture, and also help contribute to that haze. We talk about the hops that are put into this. Mosaic and Citra are what are added in the dry hop, and those hops are known for citrus notes. There's pineapple in there, tropical fruits, very nice, pleasant hop aromas. So those two varieties are really good together. They synergize really well, and you're smelling your thing when you're drinking this beer.
It was something cool that happened with this beer too. Learned that nothing is sacred here at Annex Ale Project, and the recipe has actually undergone a couple changes. Yeah, it's gone through a couple changes. The most recent, sort of like as the brew team learn about new dry hopping techniques and stuff like that. We recently changed the dry hopping technique and have applied something that we learned with another beer that we made, small batch beer. And instantly you could see the results. Already taking like a hugely aromatic beer and making it even more so.
Yeah, that was something that we worked hard towards. The same lab company doing the microanalysis also gives us values on bitterness. So you've heard of the IBU before. That's the International Bitterness Unit. And we were noticing that our bitterness was climbing and kind of getting out of control. So we experimented and changed our process and did a whole bunch of different operations to bring that bitterness back down, because we didn't want it to have a harsh bitterness associated with it. So after some trials and doing one thing at a time, one factor at a time, we got the recipe dialed in to where we really, really like it.
I want to bring up a couple of things here. I mean, one, you can hear it from the background. This is an operating brewery with a very busy tap room going on where people are enjoying beers and burgers and things in the background. So Annex is a place you can visit. Like, people can go there tomorrow. Like, you can, get up in the morning and drive to Calgary and be there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and join you there. Tell people what it's like to go to Annex. Like, why should they go there? What's it like to go? What should people look for other than Aaron kicking over this camera?
The tap room is always a great place to try pretty much any beer that we've released over the last couple months. And honestly, we probably put out a new beer every 2 weeks. So you're guaranteed to get the freshest batch, most interesting stuff that we do, kind of see the space that we work in. And yeah, I mean, not to mention, we've got a business within our business called Little Empire. They do amazing smash burgers, hot dogs, and things like that, that pair incredibly well with our beers. So, yeah, I mean, another aspect to our business. When we first opened the doors, we did not have the license to brew, but we had all the equipment in the building. So the brewers started messing around with making craft sodas. So some of you might know us for our Saskatoon lemonade, or our root beer, ginger beer, and our most recent release is a craft cola. And so when you're here, you can also mess around with some cocktails that the taproom staff have come up with. And yeah, there's always just like interesting stuff like that going on here.
And it's a fun space. It's not a big space, but it's a really fun space. And you always run into interesting industry people. Like, I was just coming in for lunch and I ran into Morgan Rattray, and then I ran into you, and it was just ended up being this big weird table that ended up taking up the whole afternoon. It was great. Annex is just one of those people you run into friends.
Yeah, and like I said, we're literally next door to establishment, so you can kind of get two birds drunk with one stop. So
Oh, come on. There's a weird motorcycle shop in between the two of you. But yes, otherwise
not
it's
for long.
absolutely true.
Rumor has it, not for long.
Oh, they're gone?
I've heard.
No,
I've heard
I'm
that,
told they're being
establishment
moved out, yeah.
might be growing.
So one thing I did want to just ask about real quick before we move on to force majeure is you talked a little bit about the evolution of this beer. Now, this is a core beer. And when we talk about seasonals change year over year. They have a lot of freedom. How does changing a core beer in your lineup work? I mean, when you guys started and you opened, like it was a different beer scene. And I don't think Forward Progress was a core beer when you first opened. I'm pretty sure it wasn't. But no, how does Forward Progress continue to evolve over time, and how do you, as a brewery, as a brewing team, as a brewing and sales collaboration, like how do you treat evolving a core beer over time, and how does it change?
Yeah, it's interesting that I mean, we've only, like I said, we've only been around for 5 years. In that time, the industry has changed dramatically. It's grown incredibly. And also the general taste and education of the consumer has. So to think that we started off with XPA, and I think the other one was Bitter Division. Oh God, what's happening?
You got Siri interrupting us.
Siri's
right now.
interrupting us. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if you caught that. But yeah, we started off with XPA, and then and also a beer called Bitter Division, and that was popular at the time. But as people were exposed to more beers coming up from the States, what was happening in BC, just like the haze craze that sort of swept North America, it was only a matter of time before we came up with a hazy beer. And it's just kind of, grown and evolved from there.
Well, I don't hate a really good segue. Let's get into your... I caught it before it hit the ground. Let's get into your hazy IPA. I hope nobody else saw that. It was entirely on camera, but let's hope no one saw that. It wasn't on camera. Hey, I caught it. It's fine. Shut up. So, yes, let's get into force majeure here. Just pretend that never. And I totally didn't knock it out. Thank you, Ethan. But yeah, let's talk about force majeure. I mean, this was the beer that when I first kind of got introduced to Annex, everyone was like, you need to try force majeure. Now I'm all about forward progress and idle hands, but I mean, force majeure was, to me, the beer that got me into Annex for the very first time. I think that was true for a lot of people. Why don't you tell us about force majeure and this particular expression of IPA for you? Because you do a lot of IPAs. I think I have 3 different IPAs, and if I don't, it's because I sold that last 4-pack of Practical Theology.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, like we really focused, especially when we started, on North American styles, really like hop forward beers. And I think IPAs are just kind of our comfort zone. We know, first off, that they're very popular, so they sell very quickly. Unfortunately, they're very expensive to make. So we mix it up a little bit, and I think it's kind of fun. I mean, I think it's for the brew team to sort of mess around with something that you're so familiar with, yet try to come up with new and interesting ways of presenting. I mean, basically the same style of beer, right?
For sure, it's pretty cool to see how versatile our brewery can be in terms of what products we come out with. So we can build a recipe, and it can start with a basic lager all the way up to a oak-aged foeder sour beer with fruit additions and getting the oak flavor in there. So yeah, it's really cool to be able to have that freedom and that experimental side that is a very strong core value at Annex, and something that we're super proud of.
I want to put a pin in that because I do want to talk to you about your food program just in a minute, but I want to swing back to Steve because he hasn't had anything to do for just a minute. Steve, so I have my opinions, which I won't say yet, but forward progress versus force majeure, where do you come down on this?
You know, I really like the forward progress. I think that's my
Steve,
that's
you
my
and I are
pick
going to
of the
get
bunch
along
tonight.
just fine.
Kyle, why does it have to be an either or?
It doesn't have to be an either or, but I mean, I come up to Annex, I buy a bunch of beer, I have to drive back to Lethbridge. If it was both, and it might be Tuesday because I'm staying overnight, I can't drive back to Lethbridge, so it has to be an either or.
And
So
that's
if I
totally
have
fair.
to only
Honestly,
have one,
like
it's going to be forward progress. But I want to jump it back to Steve. Why forward progress? Because I know why I like one or the other, but why do you? Why forward progress for you?
That dry hop, I think, that does it, and the aftertaste, the hoppiness, the aftertaste, and yeah, it just feels like a fuller beer for me. But I'm not a beer expert, so I'm going to throw that back to you, Kyle, and say, why do you like it?
Because it tastes like home in a way. I think that force majeure is very much it's a New England IPA in the 2016 Ford New England IPA school. I really respect what Good Authority does. I really love Idle Hands. Forward Progress, to me, it tastes like Annex. It's the beer that, to me, I will always associate with the brewery. As much as I'll, bemoan them not making meats and bounds anymore, I didn't drink a lot of meats and bounds. To me, Forward Progress is the beer that I'll always associate with them. It's the one I like the most. It's the one that, when I go there and I get myself a little Empire burger and a thing of dirty fries and I sit there for an hour and change and whatever. I always start with what's new on tap, whether it be the Maybach or the new sour, or the Dunkel, or whatever they're doing. I'll have the newest thing, and it's like, oh, do you want another one of those? No, I want a Forward Progress. Thank you so much. It's the beer that to me I'll always associate with Annex in the same way that with Establishment I'll think of Jamrock, or with Cabin I'll think of Super Saturation, or with 88 I'll think of Night Gallery. For me, the beer with Annex will always be Forward Progress because it's the one that it feels the most like Annex to me, and that's why I like it. I'm sure that Colin and Rupert are just sitting there on the edge of this, like, no, we have other opinions. Don't put us in the corner like that. But no, it to me is the most core Annex beer for me, and that's why I'll always enjoy it. I'm sure you would both really like a counterpoint to that, so go ahead.
I honestly, I can't speak for Colin, but before I started working for Annex, Forward Progress was probably my favorite beer being made in Alberta. It showed me that I didn't need to go outside the province to find quality beer, and what I was looking for and what I was seeing from these breweries that I just really looked up to and would seek out when I was traveling and what have you. That was the first beer that really hit me on the head and said, dummy, we have fantastic beer in Alberta. So yeah, it's got a special place in my heart too. Yeah.
Colin, what about
And
you?
Kyle, Kyle, I completely agree with you that whenever I'm taking a break from craft beer and 2 weeks vacation or something, and I haven't had any of the Annex beer for a while, and my palate's reset, and I come back to work and I'm doing a sampling or an evaluation, and I have Forward Progress, I'm like, whoa, that's the beer that I remember when I first got into craft brewing. So it definitely has an emotional attachment to it when I drink that beer.
And sometimes that's the fun part, is you come back to a thing repeatedly and it's not quite the same, because I know this beer has definitely evolved over time, but it's always a touchstone for me. And I hope that for people watching, one of these has become a touchstone for them. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised when I say, like, my pick of the night's Forward Progress. That was, to a certain point, a foregone conclusion, because I've had all these beers out of can. I've had them on tap. I knew I was going to like Forward Progress best. That's just the way it goes. Steve, what was your pick of the night? What did you like the best? And there's no right or wrong answer. They're all good.
The Forward Progress would be my first pick. And yeah, the Force Majeure would be second for me.
Nice. No, I struggle to ask. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say I would definitely buy a 6-pack of this next time I see it out there.
Well, the nice thing is, I mean, all of the core beers from Annex are on Liquor Connects. They're sold province-wide. You can get them anywhere in the province, which is great. And you do a really good job of keeping everything super fresh up at Connect. So nobody's going to, unless the store is doing a bad job, you're not going to get stale beer. Rupert,
Yeah, as long as we're doing our
what
job,
of the
too.
4 cores is kind of your favorite tonight? Now, that's not to say what's your favorite all-time, because beers have variations. I mean, where are you coming down? What's your favorite tonight?
Absolutely. Honestly, it will always be Forward Progress. It might not be the beer that I reach for all the time, but when I meet with accounts and they tell me that they want to put Forward Progress on tap or they want to put it on their shelves, that means the most to me. It's just the beer that I feel represents Annex the best. It's what we do. Yeah, so I mean, and I hope we all have the same batch, but this one.
Well, we should. We picked it all up at the same time, so.
Yeah, but again, we make this
a
a lot. So
I just one day,
yeah,
week, too.
this batch is exceptional. So
batch is getting submitted to the Alberta Beer Awards. if I'm
Oh,
not
really?
mistaken.
Nice.
Yeah, really happy with this particular batch. So yeah.
I'll let you have the final word on the beers. I mean, you're the person who made them. I won't ask you to rank them because I wouldn't ask a mother to rank her children. So, what do you
There's always
do? You have any
We
final
all know
thoughts
this.
for us on the way out?
Well, yeah, I think I'll be the different one and say Idle Hands. Idle Hands is a beer that I'm super proud of just because it is a Pilsner. And when I first started here, like, we're called Annex Ale Project. The word Pilsner was not something that was said, and we weren't even thinking about brewing lagers. And so the fact that we got here, we're making a craft lager, is awesome. And it's super clean, super crisp. It's refreshing. And now that the weather's nice and the sun's out and everything's green, that's the beer that I go to. It's most refreshing and reminds me of summer.
Awesome. Well, thank you all of you for joining us. I'll ask you to stick around after the cameras go off just so we can debrief after we finish. I want to thank everybody for coming. I mean, Colin, Rupert, you guys have done so well. You've been absolutely incredible. Annex Ales is right off McLeod Trail at the former Holiday Inn. What's the cross street? I actually don't know. Sorry, I'm asking.
good question. It's a good
Okay,
question.
good. So it's at the former Holiday Inn in McLeod. Yes, you're open for
42nd
lunch
Ave,
and dinner.
42nd Ave.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, you're open for lunch and dinner. You're just off McLeod. You can always go in for beers, growlers. Should you do growlers? I've never seen somebody get a growler there.
Yeah.
Do you? Okay.
We do growlers. We don't necessarily do growlers as fills of anything that's super limited. But yeah, you can always grab a growler of the core beers for sure.
Cool. But you also have 4-packs of everything else. Steve, how do people get in touch with you for wanting to book experience with you or to donate to you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? How do people find you?
Well, so we have Facebook, Instagram under Adaptable Outdoors, and then we also have a website, adaptableoutdoors.ca, and you can book all our experiences on there and find out more information about our programs, or you can just email us at adaptableoutdoors@outlook.com. With any questions, or if you're interested in donating or being a business sponsor, please get in contact with us. Thanks again to you all for this.
No, thank you, Steve. That was absolutely fantastic. Now, Aaron, if people watch this event and said, wow, someone did an incredible job with the media, and they got someone from the Crowsnest Pass and 2 people from Calgary and this talking head on camera all at the same time, how do people get a hold of you?
Me?
Yes,
Oh,
you.
Just go to Andrew Hilton
And ask for Aaron.
I don't know. I'm in there somewhere.
It's Bird Media Boutique, and Aaron does a much better job, and he's very humble, and he shouldn't be because he does a great job. Kyle, you're with Rotary Club Mosaic of Lethbridge. Thank you so much for putting all of this together, and thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This was... There's Kyle. You ruined my outro.
Sorry.
But...
I had to get one more.
And you did. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was an absolute delight to host. I had so much fun doing it. Thank you, Steve, Colin, Kyle, Rupert, Aaron, and thank you to all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday night.